Hey, what's up guys, Pablo Munoz here. Welcome to another video. Today I'm going to do a quick unboxing and overview of the XP Pen Aris Pro 16 Generation 2 drawing tablet. Now this is going to be my first time using this tablet, so I'm going to do an unboxing. I'm going to plug it straight into the computer and I'm going to give you my 2 cents and my first impressions with this tablet. Let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Alright, so let's go ahead and start with the box. It has a very cool illustration and it looks very professional. Let's go ahead and grab a cutter and slice through these seals. So when you first open it, the first thing that you see is the tablet itself, and it's wrapped up nicely and secure just to keep it protected, which is pretty nice. Let's go ahead and pull this out. And yeah, this thing is very, very cool. It's very thin and it just looks sleek, so not too heavy, but heavy enough that you get that sort of premium feel. So that's definitely something like, you know, a gadget that would look pretty cool on your desk anyway. So very, very nice. So we're gonna start with this larger box, and here is where you'll find the quick start guide, the warranty, and a drawing glove, which is pretty cool. This is a very nice little extra that I am happy to see that they've included in the package. Again, it's just a tiny little detail, but it will make your drawing and sculpting experience using the tablet or drawing directly on the screen a little bit better and smoother. Alright, so this other box here is where you'll find the shortcut remote controller, and this thing is probably my favorite part of this tablet, and I'll show you how it works in just a bit. Even though it is plastic, it has a really nice feel to it. It is not too heavy either, so you can just hold it in your hand. You don't have to put it on the desk. Especially the wheel controller has a nice sort of snappy rotation. When you rotate this around, it sort of like clicks, so you kind of like feel that you're actually rotating it, and it has some groovy lines for a little bit of a grip, I suppose. So very nice. It also has some rubber bits at the back, so I guess you can just put it nicely and it will sit on any surface without sliding. Alright, then you have the cables for power and USB-C, which is probably all you need really. And it is also very cool that they have included a USB extension, so another nice touch. Alright, and then we have the XE Elite Stylus, and this is a fancy tube. You can just go ahead and push one of the ends and it will slide open. That's pretty nice. And it comes with extra nibs and this little handy holder in here. And you have the light gray ones, which I think are more like it will give you more like a rubber feel to it. And that's a slightly different feel from the black ones, which are just your standard basic plastic nibs. Now, this USB dongle here, I think this is just to connect the shortcut controller. I don't think you need that for the pen. And the pen itself is super lightweight. It feels really comfortable to hold, you know, perfect for long drawing sessions or sculpting. So yeah, I think it looks really, really nice. I'm actually going to swap one of these plastic nibs for a rubber one straight away, just because that's what I prefer. So what you can do is use this hole right here, and you can just push the pen or the nib of the pen here, twist it slightly, and then pull this out so that you get the nib out, and that's probably the easiest way to replace those nibs. And something nice about this pen is that it has over 16,000 levels of pressure sensitivity and tilt support. And, you know, to me, that doesn't mean much unless I actually feel it, but I'm going to show you how you can visualize it in just a bit. And the other cool thing about the pen is that it's battery free, so you don't need to worry about recharging it or anything like that. It just works straight out of the bat. Alright, so that's it for the pen. Let's go ahead and put it away for now. And once the holder click into place within this metallic sleeve, it doesn't rattle around or anything, so it feels pretty sturdy. And I do like the fact that you can push and let go to open the box. So, you know, just a tiny little thing, but I do like it. So this is pretty much it in terms of the unboxing. But before we wrap up this intro, here is everything that you get in the box. You get the Aris Pro 16-inch tablet, you get the X3 Elite Stylus with its holder, and obviously including extra nibs, all the cables to plug it in, including the USB extension, which I think is a pretty nice touch. Also, you have the shortcut remote controller with the USB dongle, the power cable, quick start guide, warranty, cleaning cloth, and what I think is an extra added bonus is a nice drawing glove. Alright, so here we have the tablet, and I'm just going to go ahead and plug this in. I just want to show you that I have the remote controller here, as well as the pen holder. So actually, let me just take this one out of this case. So I have the pen with me, and I also have this USB-C dongle, which I assume is to power or to connect to the remote controller. So let's go ahead and take this out as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and plug this in straight away. And before I go ahead and plug in this device, I just want to mention that I'm going to be using this cable that is a 3-in-1. So in an ideal scenario, you can use the one that comes with this tablet, and it's just going to be a USB-C that connects into a USB-C of your computer. However, my computer doesn't have a USB-C slot that I can use that can power this device, so I have to use the 3-in-1. So this one right here. So it's a 3-in-1 cable that this one, or this bit right here, is a USB-C that connects here at the top of the tablet, and then these two go into the computer. So one is an HDMI that goes into the back of my graphics card. This one goes into the power, and this one goes into the computer as well. So this is like the data transfer as well. So again, I just want to mention this because this is an odd scenario, just because my computer doesn't have enough power to power this device from a USB-C. But if you're using a laptop or any other computer, it will probably work just fine. So let's go ahead and plug this in. So here at the top, I'm just going to go ahead and plug this in. Another thing that I should mention that is quite interesting is that, by the way, it just powered up straight away. And right, it recognizes my computer as well, so this is good to go. What I was saying is that these two plugs in here are for either the single cable or the 3-in-1. So this is really handy because if you try to plug this in here, the actual size of the hole doesn't fit. So you have to plug in the other cable. I just thought I mentioned this because it's an interesting design, so that it prevents you from having to switch things around and try to figure out which one is for what. Plus, it also has like a little icon in here that lets you know as well. All right, so let's go ahead and set up this device. I'm just going to bring in the XP Pen drivers. And here we go. So what you see here now in the video is the actual screen of the XP Pen tablet. And I think it looks really, really good, really sharp. So I'm really happy with how things look in the display. And by the way, these are the latest drivers, and you can get them from the XP Pen website as well. So I'm going to show you how you can set up your tablet and also some of the custom settings that you can tweak. And then we're going to jump into a time lapse where I'm going to show you my custom settings and the shortcuts that I've set up to work in my workflow, basically, the way that I work. So the first thing I like to do is calibrate the device. So I'm going to grab the pen, and because it doesn't really rely on battery or anything like that, this drawing tablet recognizes the pen straight away, which is awesome. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this calibration button right here. And this gives me a white screen. And although it is a little bit hard to see in the video, hopefully you can see that, but I have this red cross on the top left corner. So all I need to do is click on the center of that cross, and with your pen obviously, and then repeat the same to the rest of the corners of the screen, and one more here in the center of the screen. That's it. The next bit is to adjust the work area, and this is basically how much screen area you want to work on when you're drawing or sculpting. So I think it's just better to keep it as by default, which is the full screen area. So it just means that you can use the entire screen, or I can use the entire screen as my canvas. But again, this is a personal thing. You might want to work on a smaller area. I don't know why you would want to do that, but it is there if you want to do it. So not much changes in here. I'm just going to keep this as it is. The only thing to mention though is that you can change the orientation of the screen. So you can use these to maybe rotate things around, and you can use the tablet in portrait mode, for example. And that might be something that works for you. All right, let's go ahead and go back here. Now the display settings here at the bottom right is where you can change the color space, the brightness, and the contrast of the screen as well. But I think the defaults are pretty decent. I'm not gonna mess with this too much. And just to show you, as I change this slider, just to show you, obviously you don't see that on the screen, but if you look at this from this other camera that I have, you can see how it changes the brightness of the screen, and is very responsive. And another cool thing, or another cool feature that I found, is that you can control the display brightness of this tablet from the physical buttons here on the top right corner of the device. And I just think this makes it a lot more convenient than the digital slider, so I do appreciate this tiny feature. All right, so that's pretty much it for the display settings. I'm gonna go back here and let's move on to the pen. Now, in the pen settings, one of the things that I found really, really useful is that you can see the levels of pressure at the bottom right of the interface. Now, this is cool because, to be honest, 16,000 levels of pressure sound good, but it doesn't really mean much unless you can actually see it. But when you can see you have visual feedback as you press harder or softer, it is easier to see how it affects your workflow. So I do appreciate this kind of like gouge showing you the levels of pressure. So here on the left-hand side, you have the little drawing area to test it out. And I'm just gonna scribble something here, but pressing very softly. And you see that I'm reaching around 2,000 levels of pressure. Now, this other part here at the top left, we have this sort of curve. And these are essentially a few presets for pressure profiles. And let's go ahead and click on this icon next to the drawing pad to erase it. And if we go ahead and click on this first preset here, it's going to give me a profile that is very sensitive, especially in the low level pressures. So if we draw now, you'll see that I'm reaching almost 10,000 levels of pressure, even though I'm really not pressing that hard. And in fact, let me just go ahead and switch cameras again, and I'm going to show you from this different angle that I'm literally holding the pen with 2 fingers and not pressing hard at all, and I'm still getting quite a thick line in here. So if you don't want to press too hard on the tablet and you're actually good at controlling those subtle low levels of pressure, let's say, this might be for you. However, for me, I prefer the opposite, right? So let's go ahead and try another preset out. So this basically inverts that profile curve. So now, in order to get a thicker line, I need to press quite hard to get to those, let's say, 16 levels of pressure. So of course, all of this is very personal depending on how you work, but it is nice to see that you have the ability to change it based on what feels right for you. In my case, like I said, I prefer to have more control over the low levels of pressure. So I'm just going to go ahead and change this a little bit. Let's go ahead and choose this other profile in the middle, which gives me a much more linear transition between low and high levels of pressure. But you can also click on this point right here in the curve and adjust it to customize it further. So let's go ahead and try a couple of versions here for this curve. And I think this feels much better, at least for me, for the way that I work. I'm going to go for something like this, maybe just a bit more. All right, now in terms of the checkboxes here on the right-hand side, I'm leaving everything as default except the Windows ink. Again, it really depends on your workflow, on the applications that you use and all of that, but I found that in some applications, leaving the Windows ink on can actually make more issues and more problems. So I'm just gonna turn it off. And finally, you'll see that in this UI, you have this kind of like picture of the pen, and you have the eraser and the buttons of the pen highlighted with green. So what you can do is hover over this, and it will tell you what commands have been assigned by default to these buttons and the eraser. So in my case, I don't really use the double click much, for instance, in this button right here. So I'm gonna change this. Let's go ahead and click on this button, and a new window pops up. Let me just bring this in here. And I'm going to replace this button of my pen with something that I use more often. So let's go ahead and choose something like space here. And the reason I want to go for space is because I can bring in a quick palette in ZBrush using the spacebar, and I can also use the spacebar, for example, in Photoshop to hold and move the canvas around. So this is going to be a lot more useful for me than the double click. And another cool thing to mention is that you can click on this plus icon right here at the top. And at the moment, what I've been doing is basically editing the global settings for all applications, but you can actually, like I said, click here and choose a specific application to change the settings and the shortcuts and basically configure that in a way that when you change that application, those settings and those configuration and shortcuts that you've done are going to change with it. So you can have different shortcuts for, let's say, ZBrush, and a different set of shortcuts for Photoshop or any other application that you use. So very handy stuff. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the controller. And from the top here, you'll see that we have this sort of drop down, but there is nothing else. So if I click on it, there's nothing happening. So we need to first turn on the shortcut remote. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you. It's just sliding this little switch here at the top. And also make sure that you have the USB dongle plugged in into your computer as well. And because I turned on the controller after I started the drivers, I'm going to have to restart the drivers again. So just so that it can pick up the controller. So let's do that again. All right, here we go again. And now I'm going to click on the drop down, and you can see we now have the shortcut remote, and we'll be able to customize it as well. All right, so let's go ahead and choose that. And as you can see, I have already configured this to be 90 degrees. But let me set it back to the defaults with 0 degrees, just to show you what it means. So if you look up here, the logo of the XP Pen is kind of like horizontal. So I assume that this is meant to be, placed somewhere there or next to you, whatever, so you have access to the buttons. I find this to be much more convenient if I can hold it in one single hand, and then I can rely on my thumb to essentially select the different keys or the wheel, right? So this is the only reason why I switch it from this kind of like angle to the 90 degrees, so I can hold it with my hand. So, all right, let's go back in here into the UI, and I'm going to set it back to 90 degrees. So now we have all these keys and the wheel, of course, to customize and assign any shortcut that we want. Now, I'm going to show you how easy it is to assign anything that you want to these keys, and then I'll show you the reasoning behind why I set up the controller the way that I did to work with, the applications that I use the most, so essentially in my workflow, and hopefully that will give you some ideas as well to customize the controller for your specific needs. All right, so to change or assign the shortcut, all you need to do is click on one of these keys, and this new window will pop up. And from here, you can assign a shortcut or a command, whatever you want. In this case, you can just put it in here. It could be a combination of letters, a combination of a modifier with a letter. You can also use the mouse control section, and this is simply to select a modifier, like, for instance, the shift key or the control, or you can use the two together if you want, or maybe simply a double click action, that sort of thing. The next section, called Other, is just basically commands on your computer. So you can, for instance, use the switch monitor to essentially change the monitor that you can control with this tablet. So I'm just going to leave this shortcut as Control plus Shift plus Z for now. And the next thing is the wheel, which I think is pretty cool. And when you click on it, you have 4 different actions that you can control with. And I think these 4 default actions are pretty good. So you have zoom, scroll, brush size, and rotate. And I'll show you how I use this in Photoshop later on as well. And of course, the way that you switch between those actions is with the button right in the middle of the wheel. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize this now, and I'm going to bring in ZBrush into the display here so I can show you how this works. All right, so this is ZBrush, and I just want to show you how I set up this controller so that I don't have to rely on a keyboard, and I can just work with this on my hand and then just start sculpting. So in ZBrush, one of the modifiers that I use the most, and it is actually used for a lot of things in ZBrush, is the Alt key. So I map that to this key right here, the one in the center, and this is kind of like my default, more ergonomic, I would say, the default way of holding the controller. So my thumb rests on this key. So this is the one that I use the most, so that's why I mapped it in here. So with this one, if I press this, I access Alt, and that way I can pan, I can zoom in and out, and I can obviously rotate around as well. So very, very, very convenient. The next key that I use the most as well is the Shift key, which is mapped to the one on the top right. So the Shift key in ZBrush is to smooth things out. So let me just get closer here, and I'm going to select something like the hair of this monkey here, and hopefully you can see it here in the recording. But if I press the Shift key, I can go ahead and smooth this out. So you see how everything gets smoothed out, right? So that is something that I use quite often. Now, if I want to undo this, I'm going to go to the one on the left-hand side. So this button right here, naturally for me, if I want to go back, I just want to go to the left-hand side and click on it. So if I click on this, you see it's undo. So it's Control Z. So it's very, very convenient to have these three keys, and I don't need to have any label or any icon or anything to remind me. It's more about like a muscle memory to go between Alt, Shift, and then go back. Another tool that I use a lot is the masking tool in ZBrush, and I map this to the center. So I'll show you what that looks like. So if I click on this button right here, I can go ahead and mask an area. So when I'm going to go ahead and maybe smooth this out, I'm not going to smooth the entire area. I'm just going to smooth part of it. So hopefully you can see that this area is being protected. So let's go ahead and undo that. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to clear my mask, Control, click and drag. So essentially I have these three controllers, or these three keyboards, to the ones that I use the most, as well as the control. All right. So now those are the basics. The other thing that I want to show you is that if I put my hand on the screen, just for comparison, the area, or the real estate area to actually work based on my UI is quite small, right? So one thing that I like to do is collapse this palette so that it opens up a little bit more. And then if you press Tab on your keyboard, you can go into full screen mode. So that's basically what I have set up for this one right here. So I can press this and I can go into full screen. So I can go back and forth between my entire UI to select different things, and then tab to essentially go into full screen. So that is pretty handy. So when I'm in this full screen mode, right, rather than bringing in all my UI again and back and forth, what I can do is, and it feels more natural as well, is to start moving this around, you know, position myself in a way that I want to sculpt maybe, and maybe let's go ahead and select the face in here. And if I go ahead and press this one right here, it's going to bring in a custom palette that I have customized with the tools that I use the most. So from here, I can inflate, I can do a bunch of different things that I use in my workflow. The other one right here is for another palette where I can access all the brushes that I use the most. All right. So basically, I can just, you know, start sculpting or start like moving around. I can bring in my palette here. I can select something. Let's try the damp standard brush, for example. Let's reduce the brush size. Get closer here, and then I can just go ahead and maybe do a tiny bit of, I'm just pressing really hard just to show you what this does. But this is very, very simple. And if I want to change this and maybe soften this up, I can maybe increase my brush size, and I can press the Shift key and I can smooth this out. Right? So I'm just showing you in general what I would do, and then I'm just going to jump into a quick time lapse to actually show you how I could interact with the tablet and this controller a little bit easier. Now, one thing that I haven't mentioned is the wheel of the controller, and that is really, really handy. So if I go ahead and start using this, it's going to try to use the zoom, right? At the bottom of the interface, you can see a little indication of what this does. Now in ZBrush, because it's a 3D application, I don't have zoom in that sort of way. So this one will work a lot better for Photoshop. However, if I press the center of the wheel, I can go into scroll. If I press it again, I go from scroll to brush size, and that one actually works really nicely in ZBrush. So I don't know if you can see the, I'm going to put it in. Let me actually move this out of the way so that you can see the size of the brush, hopefully. All right, so here's my brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and scale it up. So you can see just with the wheel, I can upscale or downscale that size of the brush. So it's very, very handy to just go ahead and do this for like little details or something for, you know, larger proportional changes. So very, very handy stuff. I definitely think is a very, very powerful way of working without the need of using the keyboard. And hopefully that'll show in the next bit. All right, so one thing that I might want to change, and this is something that I just noticed as I was explaining this, is that I tend to use the solo mode quite often. So the solo mode, if I bring in my UI, is in here. So the solo mode basically isolates a single object. So this is just the body of this character, right? But instead of going in here into my UI, if I want to maintain this sort of like full screen, what I can do is map the solo mode to this one right here that I'm not using anymore. So let's go ahead and do that very, very quickly. And I'm going to select the K10 key here in my controller, and I'm going to replace the shortcut key with the letter S. This is a custom shortcut that I have assigned in ZBrush, and the S key basically allows me to go into solo mode. So let's go ahead and try this out. All right, so now in ZBrush, I can go ahead and press the K10 key in the controller, and you'll see how easily I can just, you know, isolate and change between objects and isolate those objects in ZBrush. All right, so now that I have set up things in the way that I like, I'm going to jump into a quick time lapse, and I'm going to show you a bit of sculpting and some tweaks that I'm going to do in this character, but I'm going to rely on this remote shortcut controller 100%. So that means I'm not going to touch the keyboard. All right, so that's about it. Just some subtle tweaks and changes here in ZBrush. But now I'm going to set up this guy for a comic style illustration. I'm going to turn this basically into a 2D image, and I'm going to send it to Photoshop to finalize it in there. So let's go ahead and turn the background into a white color. And then I'm going to use a custom material that I created specifically for this type of more graphic style. And by the way, this is a free resource that you can find on my website. So feel free to grab it and try it yourself. And as you can see, I just turned the 3D object, this monkey or samurai monkey, into a more of a comic style outline. So I can go ahead and simply sculpt some more details like wrinkles and you know, edges and things like that here. And the material will basically make those sculpted lines look like they're dark lines or part of the outline. On a side note, you can actually edit this material and remove some of the harsh shadows or increase the thickness of the outline and things like that. But I'm going to keep things simple. And once you're happy with your camera angle and the material that you've set up, you can go ahead and render this out, send it to Photoshop, and continue the process in there. I have already done that, of course, just to save some time. So I'm going to show you how this is set up in Photoshop. So let me just go ahead and switch cameras again to show you how this remote controller behaves in Photoshop too. So in Photoshop, you have more control because it's just a 2D software, right? So you have more control with the wheel. So if I use these right now, so let's click on Photoshop. I can change the brush size. So hopefully you can see, here's my brush, and I can just go ahead and scale this up and down, right? Very cool, very responsive. If I press the center, it's going to switch to the rotate. So I can actually rotate the entire canvas in Photoshop. And to me, this is like one of the best things about it, because in Photoshop, to me, it's kind of like convoluted way of rotating things around. So this is very, very handy. So let's go ahead and do the next one. So this is the zoom, which is by default. I can just go ahead and zoom in and out. And if you remember, I set up the second button of my pen to be the spacebar. So the reason I did that is because in ZBrush, let me actually switch back to ZBrush and I can show you the reason why. So in ZBrush, if I press this button right here, it brings in this, hopefully you can see it from here, it just brings this quick palette, and that quick palette is actually really handy to be able to select things like the color or, you know, the brush size, different things all within this mini palette, right? So that is with the spacebar using this button. Now in Photoshop, spacebar is obviously to move the canvas. So I can use this wheel to zoom in, then I can press this and I can basically click and drag to move this around. So it makes it really, really easy to be able to zoom in and out, move this, and, you know, continue working in Photoshop, right? So that is the idea. And by the way, this is one of the renders that I did from ZBrush using that material that I just showed you. So finally, if I click on this button again, we have the scroll. So that basically goes up and down. I don't find this one as useful, but it's there in case you want to use it. So the one that I like to leave as my default would be the zoom, so that I can easily zoom in and out. And then again, I can move the canvas with this. All right, so let me just move this a little bit out of the way so I can show you in a new layer. I'm going to select, something like this. And by the way, if I right click, which is set to the first button here in the pen, I can also bring in this palette. So it just also makes it very easy to change the brush size. All right, so with this one, let me just switch back to the full screen so that you can see. So I'm going to press really softly and gradually start pressing harder to create this thicker line, as you can see here. So to be honest, this is where the profile curve, or that profile pressure curve that we adjusted in the settings, comes in really handy. And it gives me a lot of control over my line work. Okay, cool. So you'll see that because this is ultimately a render from a 3D object, there are some sections that look maybe a bit too perfect, or maybe we're missing some lines in the connections of the objects here. So I'm just going to go into another quick time lapse to show you how I would go about refining a line work that comes from a 3D render like this one. And I'm just going to show you in Photoshop again, just taking advantage of the pressure feature of this pen and tablet. Okay, so that's it for the adjustments of the line. I've also set up a layer here with some color, but I actually quite like the black and white illustration as it is right now. So I'm just gonna turn this off, and instead I'm gonna go ahead and bring in another set of layers that have like a much more interesting background image here. And there you have it. This is the final illustration. So just to wrap it up, I would say that the controller is a very handy tool. And one thing that I thought at the beginning when I first hold it, I thought it feels a little bit like weird, especially that we don't have any numbers or any visual feedback, let's say, in terms of the keys. But to be honest, you won't need them at all. It is much easier to get used to the to the position of the finger. So it has, hopefully you can see it here in the recording, it has like a little dot in here. So, you know, it's more tactile, so you know that this is the center of the control or the remote, and then you can just go up and down to the different areas. So very handy stuff. I think this makes the whole experience and the whole workflow a lot more intuitive. And like I said, I didn't have to touch the keyboard, which I have here behind me. Once you set up the controller in a specific way for your workflow, it doesn't have to be the way that I just showed you, it's going to speed up your entire work quite a bit. So definitely give it a go. Also, the pressure sensitivity and the pen itself, I think it works really, really good. I'm gonna add another layer just to show you something else that I forgot to mention. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch to the brush size, increase that brush size quite a bit, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. So that is just a simple squiggle line, but if I switch this to my eraser, I can just go ahead and erase this like so. And I can also increase the eraser size, which is independent to the brush size, which is pretty cool. All right, so I can just, if you're more used to this sort of like workflow, you can just use this to paint around, and then the eraser to erase. All right, let's just get rid of that one. But yeah, this is another thing that that I found quite useful, that the fact that you can customize all these things and that you can easily change the keys that you assign to this remote as well as the wheel, it just makes it very convenient, so you can actually improve your own custom workflow quite a bit. So really happy with this device. I think it is definitely worth checking it out. So I'll leave some links in the video as well. And if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to put them in the comments as well. All right, so that's pretty much for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.